Hello, thanks for joining us today.
In this podcast, we focus on making the Bible easy to understand with references to today's world. We hope that you stay with us and enjoy our interpretations.
Let's jump in and get started. Shall we?
And that is exactly why the little plastic toy boats in Sunday school nurseries are a complete lie. Seriously, Stephanie, if you look at the proportions God gave Noah, we aren't talking about a cute little house on a bathtub. We are talking about a massive, terrifyingly efficient, 3-story floating shipping container designed for one thing: survival. It wasn't a cruise, it was a year-long lockdown in a wooden skyscraper.
Welcome back to Bible in a Year, making it easier to understand. I'm Stephanie Dalton, and I'm here with John Dalton. John, you are already rocking the boat today. We are on day 3, looking at Genesis 7 through 10, and a huge chunk of 1 Chronicles 1. And you're right, every time I see a picture of Noah's Ark, it looks like a cozy little cottage. But the readings today? They paint a much more intense picture.
It is intense. We're talking about 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, I know cubits sounds like a fake unit of measurement from a fantasy novel, but it's actually the distance from a man's elbow to his fingertips. If you do the math, and researchers have, that puts the ark at about 510 feet long, 85 feet wide, and 50 feet tall.
Okay, put that in a modern mirror for me. How big is 510 feet? Because I don't carry a tape measure in my head.
Think about it this way. The ark was nearly 1.5 football fields long. It was taller than a modern 4-story house. NASA could have laid 3 space shuttles nose to tail on the roof with room to spare.
No way! 3 space shuttles?
Totally. And here's the kicker for the logic seekers out there. The capacity of this thing was basically 450 standard semi-trailers. It could hold at least 112,500 sheep. So when people say, how did they fit all those animals? The answer is simple. They had the storage space of a massive industrial warehouse.
That actually makes it feel a lot more real. It wasn't a miracle box where everything shrunk. It was a feat of engineering. And the Bible even mentions it had the same proportions as a modern cargo ship, which are designed specifically to survive massive waves.
Exactly. It struck a perfect balance between stability, so it wouldn't capsize, and comfort, or seakeeping. It was basically Biosphere 2.0 on the water. But Stephanie, here's the part of the story that everyone, and I mean everyone, gets wrong.
Oh, let me guess. The 40 days and 40 nights part?
Yes. We sing the songs about the 40 days of rain, and we think the whole thing was over in a month and a half. But if you actually track the calendar dates Moses gives us in Genesis 7 and 8, Noah wasn't in that box for 40 days. He was in there for 370 days.
Wait, a full year? Over a year?
A full solar year plus some change. Think about that. 1 year in a wooden ship with thousands of animals, no outdoors, and only one window at the very top. That isn't a Bible story. That is a psychological endurance test.
I complain when I'm stuck in the house for 2 days because of a snowstorm. Imagine 370 days of, well, the smell alone, John.
It was not a scented candle situation. But it's in that long, dark, smelly wait that we find the most important word in this entire section. We're in Genesis 8, the water has reached its peak, and everything outside is gone. And then verse 1 says, "But God remembered Noah."
I've always found that phrasing so strange. God remembered. Like, had he forgotten him? Was God busy with something else and suddenly thought, oh, right, Noah, I left him in the boat?
That is such a common, deeper dive question. But in Hebrew, the word for remembered is zakar. And zakar doesn't mean to recall a forgotten thought. It's covenant language.
Okay, give me the 5th grade rule for zakar.
It means to act on a promise you already made. It's like when you set a high-priority calendar alert on your phone. The phone didn't forget the meeting. It just reached the moment where it was time to activate the notification and do something about it. When God remembered Noah, he wasn't having a memory lapse. He was stepping in to fulfill the contract he made with him back in chapter 6.
That is so much more powerful. It's like saying, God began to move on Noah's behalf.
Precisely. And look at the symmetry here. The whole flood story is written in what's called a chiasmus, basically a literary X shape. The first half is 7 days of waiting, 7 days of waiting, 40 days of rain, 150 days of water rising. And then at the very center of the X is that verse, God remembered Noah. Then the second half mirrors the first, 150 days of water receding, 40 days of waiting, 7 days, 7 days.
So the entire structure of the text is built to point to that one moment? God's faithfulness is the hinge of the entire disaster?
You got it. Everything before that word Zakar is destruction. Everything after it is restoration. It's the pivot point from death to life. And it's why we see Noah sending out the birds. First the raven, then the dove.
I always wondered about the raven. Why the raven first?
Ravens are unclean scavengers. They don't mind landing on, well, let's just say floating debris. But the dove? The dove represents rest. In Hebrew, the word for rest is manoah, which is actually related to Noah's name. When the dove couldn't find a place to rest, it meant the world wasn't ready yet. When it came back with that olive leaf, it was the first sign that the new creation was officially coming back online.
It's like a welcome home sign in the middle of a wasteland.
Exactly. And it finally leads to that moment in Genesis 8, verses 14 to 16, where God says, "Go forth from the ark." After 370 days of social distancing in a boat, Noah steps out onto a clean slate. But as we're going to see in segment 2, clean slates don't always stay clean for long.
Knowing humanity, it probably lasted about 10 minutes. But before we get to the first vineyard disaster, we have to talk about the rainbow. John, you told me that the rainbow is actually a decommissioned weapon.
Oh, it's the ultimate modern mirror for de-escalation. We think of it as a decoration, but in the Hebrew, it's a war bow. And God is about to hang it up.
We are going to dive into the covenant of the bow right after this. And don't forget, we're also looking at 1 Chronicles 1 to see how Noah's restart button actually led to the map of the world we have today. Stay with us.
No problem. Let's get back into the studio. We are moving from the relief of the ark landing into the high-stakes contract God signs with the survivors and the awkward family dinner that follows.
We are back. If you're just joining us, Noah and his family just stepped out of the ark after a year-long lockdown. The world is fresh, the air is clean, and the first thing they do is build an altar to say thank you. And John, this is where we get the rainbow. Every toddler has a rainbow on their bedroom wall, but you're saying it's not just a cute nursery decoration?
Far from it, Stephanie. In our modern mirror today, we have to look at the specific word God uses in the ESV. He says, "I have set my bow in the cloud." Now, in modern English, we think rainbow. But the Hebrew word is keshet. And in the ancient world, a keshet wasn't a pretty trick of the light. It was a war bow, a weapon of mass destruction.
A war bow? Like an archer's bow?
Precisely. Think of it like this. Imagine God as a warrior coming home from a global battle, taking his rifle off his shoulder and hanging it up on the wall. By putting the keshet in the clouds, God is performing a symbolic de-escalation. He's telling Noah and us, the hostility is finished. I am retiring my weapon of judgment.
Wow. So it's a decommissioned weapon. But wait, John, I was looking at a picture of a rainbow while I was prepping for today, and I noticed something about the shape. If you're looking at it from the ground, which way is the bow pointing?
This is the hidden gem of Genesis 9. A bow is designed to fire an arrow away from the archer, right? Toward the target. But if you look at the arc of a rainbow, the string part is facing the earth, and the bow part is pointing toward heaven.
So if God were to fire an arrow from that bow, it wouldn't hit the earth. It would hit him.
Boom! That is the gospel right there in the first 10 chapters of the Bible. God is essentially saying, if this relationship breaks again, and we both know it will, I will take the arrow myself before I ever destroy the world like this again. It's a sign of grace that points the judgment away from humanity and directly toward the heart of God.
That gives me chills. It's so much more than a weather report. It's a signature on a high-stakes contract. And that brings us to our plain English translation for the day. God calls this a covenant. In Hebrew, it's berit. We use that word in church all the time, but John, if I'm texting my friend who has never stepped foot in a church, what is a berit?
A berit is a high-stakes contract where God takes all the risk. Think of it like a terms and conditions agreement, where God scrolls all the way to the bottom and clicks I agree for both parties. He's binding himself to us, even though he knows we're still messy and prone to glitching out.
Speaking of messy, we have to talk about the end of Genesis 9. Because things get really awkward, really fast. Noah, the hero who survived the 370-day floating zoo, gets off the boat, plants a vineyard, makes some wine, and ends up passed out naked in his tent. John, I was not prepared for Noah's hangover in my morning Bible reading.
It's a total facepalm moment. I call this Forbidden Fruit 2.0. Just think about the parallels. Adam was in a garden, he took fruit, and it led to shame and nakedness. Now, Noah is in a vineyard, he takes fruit in liquid form, and it leads to, you guessed it, shame and nakedness. It's a stark reminder that even the most righteous person on the planet can't escape the corrosive effect of sin.
And the reaction of his sons is the real test here. Ham sees his father in that state and goes outside to tell his brothers. It almost feels like he's mocking him or gossiping about it. But Shem and Japheth? They take a garment, lay it across their shoulders, and walk in backward so they can cover him without looking at his shame.
It's a masterclass in how to handle a family crisis with dignity. They protected their father when he was at his most vulnerable, while Ham chose to exploit the mess. And this is a huge deal for the rest of the Bible. The blessings and curses Noah speaks after he wakes up actually set the trajectory for all the nations we're about to read about in Genesis 10.
It really is about dignity and honor. But John, before we move on, let's go back to that war bow for a second. God says, "When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the covenant." We use that word zakar in segment 1. So even the rainbow is a prompt for God to activate his mercy?
Exactly. It's a visual aid for the Creator. Not because he's forgetful, he's the one who invented memory, but to reassure us that he is covenant-minded. Every time the storm clouds gather and we get that little pit in our stomach, wondering if the world is about to end, God puts that bow out there to say, relax. I'm sticking to the contract. The war is over.
And it's a unilateral covenant, right? Meaning, God does all the heavy lifting?
Mostly, yes. In Genesis 9, verse 9, God says, "Behold, I establish my covenant with you." Noah doesn't have to sign anything or provide a deposit. God takes the full weight of the promise on his own shoulders. It's like a parent saying to a toddler, "I promise I will always take care of you, even when you're having a level 10 tantrum." The toddler doesn't have to earn the safety. They just have to exist in the relationship.
I think I've been in tantrum mode with God more than a few times this week.
Haven't we all? But here's the kicker. This contract isn't just for people. God specifically mentions it's with every living creature.
Wait, God signed a contract with the cows and the giraffes too?
He really did. It shows that God's big picture plan isn't just a save the humans project. It's a restore the whole creation project. Which is why the chronicler in 1 Chronicles 1 lists all those descendants of Japheth and Ham. Even the nations that would eventually become enemies of Israel are living under the same rainbow canopy of grace.
That's a massive perspective shift. It's so easy to think of us versus them, but the rainbow says it's all of us under God's protection.
Bingo. And that leads us perfectly into the family tree. Because Noah has these 3 sons, and from those 3, we get every single culture, language, and nation on the planet today.
But as we're about to see, one of those grandsons decided he didn't want to live under the rainbow. He wanted to build his own throne in the sky.
Ah, yes. The world's first mighty hunter. And I don't mean he was good with a deer rifle. I mean, he was a hunter of men.
We are going to meet the infamous Nimrod and talk about the great language glitch right after this. Don't go anywhere. No problem. We're in the home stretch for day 3. We're moving from the relief of the covenant into the table of nations and the rise of the world's first major geopolitical rebel. Let's get the mics hot for segment 3 and the outro.
And that is why you should never trust a guy whose name literally translates to "let us revolt." Seriously, Stephanie, if you're looking for a baby name, maybe skip Nimrod. Unless you want your kid to grow up to be the world's first literal tyrant who tries to build a skyscraper as a middle finger to the sky.
I think Nimrod has already been retired from the most popular baby name lists for other reasons. But welcome back, everyone. We are wrapping up day 3 of the Bible in a year. We've survived the flood, we've seen the rainbow, and now we're in Genesis 10 and 1 Chronicles 1 verses 5 to 23. And John, we have to talk about this guy Nimrod. The Bible calls him a mighty hunter before the Lord. That sounds, well, it sounds like he's a hero. Like he's the world's best outdoorsman.
That's the stained glass trap right there. We see mighty hunter, and we think he was really good with a bow and arrow and a deer stand. But in the ancient world, mighty hunter was a royal idiom. Kings used it to show they were tough enough to keep the roads safe from lions and predators. It was a flex of political power. But here's the kicker. His name, Nimrod, comes from the Hebrew root marad, which means to rebel or to revolt.
So his name was the Rebel?
Exactly. And the phrase "before the Lord" in the ESV can actually be translated from the Hebrew as "to the face of the Lord." It implies he was doing his hunting and his building in opposition to God. He wasn't a hero. He was the first person post-flood to try and set up a system where humans didn't need to depend on the Creator. He founded Babel and Nineveh, the two cities that would eventually become the biggest enemies of God's people.
So he's essentially the original toxic influencer. He used his charisma and his mighty warrior status to pull people away from the Rainbow Covenant and into his own kingdom.
Bingo. He's an antichrist figure. He wanted to make a name for himself, not for God. While Noah's other descendants were moving out to fill the earth like God asked, Nimrod was the guy saying, "Let's stay in one spot, build a giant fortress, and show God we're in charge now."
That is a huge contrast to the lists we see in 1 Chronicles 1 today. When I see names like Javan, Gomer, and Mizraim, I usually just scroll past. But you said these names are actually the map of the world.
They are. This is the context segment for today. In 1 Chronicles 1 verses 5 to 23, the author is tracing how Noah's 3 sons, Japheth, Ham, and Shem, became every nation on the planet. For example, Javan is the father of the Greeks. Mizraim is the Hebrew name for Egypt. Gomer's line eventually moved toward Europe.
So the Table of Nations is basically God's way of saying, you are all family.
Yes. It's the ultimate antidote to racism and ethnocentrism. By starting 1 Chronicles with these names, the author is reminding the exiles, and us, that every single culture, from the farthest reaches of Asia to the islands of the Mediterranean, shares the same DNA. We all stepped off that ark together.
I love that. It's like a global family reunion on paper. But John, there's one name in this list that always starts a massive debate in the comment section. Peleg. 1 Chronicles 1 verse 19 says, "The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided."
Oh, here we go. The Peleg debate.
Well, I have to ask, because some people look at that and say, that's plate tectonics. That's when Pangaea split into the continents we see today. Others say it's just about the Tower of Babel. Which one is it?
Okay, let's look at the plain English translation. The Hebrew word for earth there is eretz. And just like in English, eretz can mean the physical planet, or it can mean the people of the land. Most scholars think the division in Peleg's day refers to the great language glitch at Babel, where God divided the people into different language groups.
Because if the continents had literally ripped apart that fast, wouldn't it have caused a second flood-level catastrophe?
Exactly. The energy required to move a continent that fast would have vaporized the oceans. It would have been game over 2.0. The more likely hidden gem here is that Peleg's name, which means division, was a reminder of the day the world stopped speaking one language and started needing translators. It was a social division, not a geological one.
So Peleg's life was marked by the moment humanity became strangers to each other because of Nimrod's rebellion. That is, honestly, it's a little sad.
It is. It's the glitch in human communication. But And this is the connection part. Look at who is at the end of that list in 1 Chronicles. It ends with the line of Shem, which eventually leads to Abraham. Even in the middle of Nimrod's rebellion and Peleg's division, God is quietly preserving a specific line that will eventually bring the whole world back together.
It's like God is weaving a thread of hope through the phone book.
He really is. It's the big picture story. Every name in that list is a person God knew, a nation God created, and a culture that is still under the promise of the rainbow.
I think I'm going to look at those genealogies a lot differently now. It's not a list of dead people, it's a list of God's intentionality. John, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. From the 370-day floating warehouse to the warbow in the clouds, all the way to Nimrod's rebellion and the birth of the nations. What's the bottom line for us today?
I think the bottom line is that God is a God of fresh starts, but he doesn't expect us to be perfect. He knew Noah would fail in the vineyard. He knew Nimrod would rebel, but he signed the covenant anyway. He hung up his bow and said, "I'm in this with you for the long haul."
I love that. Okay, it's time for the text message summary. John, give it to us.
Text this to yourself today. Even when humanity glitches and tries to build its own kingdom, God is patiently preserving a family line that leads to a much better king.
I'm definitely sending that one to the group chat. And what's our action step for day 3?
Look at a map today, or just look at the people around you in the grocery store, and remind yourself, we are all one family. Treat a stranger like they're a long-lost cousin from the table of nations. Because, according to Genesis 10, they actually are.
That is a great challenge. Thank you for joining us for day 3 of the Bible in a year. Tomorrow, we leave the big picture of the whole world and zoom in on one specific family in the desert.
Things are about to get personal. We'll see you then.
That brings us to the end of our Bible in a day for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
We really appreciate you listening in and walking through these chapters with us.
Before you go, please take a second to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear how these modern mirrors are helping you see the text differently.
See you tomorrow for another exiting deep dive into the Word of the Lord. God bless.